Hey guys, in today's video I wanted to talk to you about a mobile game, and that mobile game is DanMachi Memoria Freese. Now, I'm personally not much for mobile games, but this one actually looked pretty cool, so I gave it a try, and I have to admit, it's actually not a bad game as far as mobile games go, but today I learned something rather disappointing, and I personally won't be supporting the English release of this game anymore due to that. So you're probably wondering, what's the issue? Well, the issue is one of censorship, and if you've spent any time on this channel before, you know by now that that is something that I simply do not support in any way, shape, or form when it comes to games and media and all of that, and, you know, just the idea of being able to express oneself freely. The content that was censored is something that we've seen before, done to the Fire Emblem series not too long ago, where you have interaction scenes with the characters, and if you want to, you can choose to, like, poke at them or pat them on the head, things like that, and the character will react in various ways. But the people at Crunchyroll Games that localize the title seem to think that this is inappropriate for English-speaking audiences, and that it has to be changed, it has to be removed, despite the fact that the feature was actually mentioned in their subtitled trailer. Take a look.
冒険者講座4時間目交流モード。この交流モードはアホにゃ。開発者は何を考えてるにゃ。登場するキャラクターとお話しできるのにゃ。それだけじゃないのにゃ。頭や体をタッチできるのにゃ。にゃんとそんなことしていいのかにゃ。いいわけないにゃ。きっと怒られるにゃ。にゃにゃにゃにゃ。むしろ怒られたいにゃ。やっぱりクロエはアホにゃ。
Okay, that was actually pretty entertaining and rather harmless. You see they're taking it pretty lighthearted, but no, of course, Crunchyroll has to decide to be the arbiters of what is acceptable for a Western audience rather than just taking the game and simply translating any dialogue into English without messing with features that were in the original version. And the funny thing about that is somebody had previously asked prior to the game's release whether or not the game was going to be censored, and to that, the team answered, nope. So either one of two things happened here. That at this point in time, they had no intention of removing any features, and then for some reason decided to last minute, or they were deliberately misleading their audience into thinking that they were getting something that they were not actually getting, a complete product. But before we make that determination, let's head on over to their subreddit where this instance of censorship was brought up by one of the players. I showed you a post from that thread earlier, but let's take a look at a few of their responses to the audience who are clearly not happy with this choice. Was touching removed from this game? In the early English trailer for the game it was mentioned. It seems you can't do it in the interact mode. Was this fully removed? Now I did show this capture earlier, but let's read the response. The touching feature was removed from the English version of the game, yes. Not as a matter of censorship or depriving non-Japanese audiences of anything, but due to what is appropriate and not appropriate for English audiences. Hope that answers your question. So they just claimed that they changed it because it wasn't appropriate. Let's take a look at the definition of censorship, shall we? The act or practice of censoring. And if you want to go a little bit further, just to clarify, just to make it clear for everybody, censor. An official who examines books, plays, news reports, motion pictures, radio and television programs, letters, cablegrams, etc. for the purpose of suppressing parts deemed objectionable on moral, political, military, or other grounds. Any person who supervises the manners or morality of others. So yes, deny it as you like, but by very definition of the term, you have censored this game. Now in this post, another player mentions that they sent a private message regarding the issue, and to that the team answers, I will pass along your feedback, but the team stands by the decision. Thanks, smiley face. Now, let me localize their response for them, since they seem to have no desire to accurately depict the work of others. We read your statement, but we really couldn't care less about your feedback, even though you're a customer. So, we'll just give a hand-wavy reply that doesn't actually mean anything. Thanks. I think I'm really getting a hang of how this localization stuff works. Now, this next post here basically just points out that, as I've demonstrated, what they're doing is, in fact, censorship, and this is the reply that they get. If you would like that feature, it is still in the Japanese version. Ah, yes. That is quality customer service, suggesting that somebody go and play a version of the game they most likely can't read because they're not fluent in the language. Now, no doubt learning a new language is a valuable skill, but they shouldn't have to do that if they want to just play one game in its complete form. It is one way to counter censorship, but it's also important that these companies don't get away with these types of practices. It's also interesting to note that the trailer that I showed a clip from earlier is still present on their official site, so they are, in a sense, falsely advertising to their audience. Given that they have tried to claim they're not guilty of censorship and they don't care for player feedback on the matter, I suppose it is safe to say they just don't care at this point. Some of you out there might be thinking that this feature isn't really a big deal, that it's petty, so it's not worth mentioning. While I agree that it isn't necessarily a big deal, that's not the issue. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a big deal. What matters is the principle behind it. If you want entertainment free of censorship from these social justice busybodies that go as far as to infiltrate these industries and try to change other people's creations to their liking based on their personal perception of what they believe is acceptable for everyone, then you can't give them an inch, because once that happens, it sets a precedent and inevitably they take it a little bit further and a little bit further until everything is completely sanitized and there is nothing left. If these teams can't keep their personal levels of comfort out of their work, then they should be fired and replaced with people committed to bringing the same experience to Western audiences. And that's not something I say lightly, as I generally don't believe people should lose their job over differences in politics or personal morals. But when they allow that to bleed over into a job that is not a work of their own and impose these types of regulations, that's when it crosses a line. There's no excuse for this behavior, and in the team's own words, it has absolutely no effect on the game. Well, if that were true, then there was absolutely no reason for it to be removed. Now, I can't force you to do anything, but I certainly do suggest that if you value products free of censorship, that you don't support this game anymore. And yeah, that sucks to say, because it's actually a game that I enjoyed, and I want to see more games based on series that I like get an English release, but not like this. Not at the sacrifice and integrity of the developer's original intent, regardless of how silly some of these features may seem to some people. Make your opinion to them heard in a somewhat respectable manner and show these companies that these practices don't sell products. Aside from just learning Japanese, it's the only way to ensure that this stops, because once the money dries up, they'll realize they lost their audience. Thanks for watching, guys.